Conway, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Murphy,
Here.
Alderman Kotar,
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Here.
Alderman Bosley,
Here.
Alderwoman Martin,
Here.
Chairman Boyd.
Present.
That's what Johnson wants.
6 present, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The first bill we're gonna hear is Board Bill 120, sponsored by myself, that's dealing with sidewalk replacement. You can't, you mind looking at it? So I did get a call from the mayor's office requesting that the bill be held, but we will hear the bill so that people understand what the problem is. And Kent will explain to us what they would do administratively so that we don't have to actually do a board bill. So the problem is, the utility companies, right now is mainly Laclede Gas. They come in our neighborhoods, they tear up the sidewalk, they put little holes in the sidewalk, and then they put a patch in it. Some people have very nice sidewalks, and then it distracts from the nice sidewalk that they have. And it's unacceptable, and it's just all over the 22nd Ward, I know, and I've talked to other people, and I've been on next door, and across the whole city, they have similar complaints. And it's something we need to do something about, and that's the reason why I did the board bill. And I've spoken with Alderman Martin, who has similar concerns about the streets. So Kent, what would be helpful for us if you just kind of tell us what the process is when utility companies like Laclede Gas come in and disrupt the street and sidewalks, what the permit process is like, what the responsibilities are when they leave.
Yeah, currently we don't really have a lot of rules written down to explain how this should happen. Throughout the years, I've sat down with Laclede Gas many times. Their instructions to their crews are, don't do this 2x2 hole in the middle of a 5 foot by 5 foot section of sidewalk. Just because this level knows doesn't mean this lower level knows. We have made them pull out many sidewalks because of this. There was a handful of them down in Soulard, I remember from about a year and a half ago. What we would like to see is for them to restore them to a similar finish of what's next door to it. And for them to remove the whole sidewalk slab, because first of all, it doesn't make any sense why I'm gonna jackhammer a 2 foot by 2 foot square in a 5 foot section of sidewalk. It's actually easier for me to take the whole thing out. So it doesn't make any sense to begin with, and it looks horrible, secondly. So what I would like to see with all of us on the same page, whether it be a board bill or us add this to our permit qualifications. With every permit we hand out a page of rules and regulations. Really, until recently, this wasn't a huge deal. It was a big deal, but it wasn't a huge deal until Laclede Gas decided to work on every street in the city, starting about, 7 years ago and going for another 10 years after today. So it'd be very nice to see this actually get formalized and everybody hears concerns and my concerns and actually get those formalized so we have some stick to use on Laclede Gas later. And the best thing for all of us is, or in my opinion for all of us, is at least this way, if they don't fix something and they don't do it up to code, I don't give them another permit. You know, you can fine them, you can do this, you can do this, you can do that. The best thing in the world to do to most of these contractors is say you can't work in the city anymore. That's the biggest stick you can pull on, because that affects them. So yeah, currently there's no real rules, regulations. As we mentioned a little bit before the meeting, there's kind of a confusion between specs for concrete pours. The city spec actually says all concrete should be white broom to finish. Most people don't care for white broom finish in 2017. It doesn't match anything near it. If you get a 30, 40-year-old sidewalk, the best thing you can do is what we've been doing on the 50/50 sidewalk program for almost a decade now, is going back in with exposed aggregate, because it matches a lot better. Because that's essentially what a 30-year-old sidewalk is after it's been rained on for 30 years. couple things I did notice in the board bill was some mention of the collar. The collar, if you have a white sidewalk that was put in with whether broom finish or with picture frame and swirls like we've seen out there, if it's poured 5 years ago, I'm not gonna match that. Nobody is. It takes 5 years to age and look that way. So the collar is probably the only thing I would really argue in here at all. Other than that, I pretty much agree, I think, with everything in here. And if you guys want to pass a board bill, and I can do it administratively on my end too by adding it to our permit sheet or permit qualifiers, that's also fine. It doesn't matter to me either way, to be quite honest with you, but we do need this rule written down in some form so we can use it in the future.
Okay, talk about the streets.
The streets, that's a whole different animal. What I would say if somebody is working in a majority of the slab, because most of these street slabs are 15 by 20s, 15 by 15s, 15 by 20s.
Wait a minute, what do you mean 15?
15 feet by 15 feet or 15 feet by 20 feet.
Streets.
Streets,
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, I have some concrete streets.
Yeah,
Okay.
Most are asphalt.
yeah. There's a lot of them in 12, 13, 14, 16. They're around. The way they're usually poured is this is a curb, this is a curb. You got a joint going up the middle, and this is 15 feet going down to the end of the table is 20 feet.
Okay.
I think it's going to be very cost prohibitive for a lot of people. Not that a lot of these streets are concrete, but like Jack's got a lot of people working downtown as far as Amber and everybody else. If one of these streets was concrete and they come in and do a 3-foot wide trench for the next 2 miles, I don't think you're going to get that out of Ameren. I don't think you're going to get that out of Gas. I don't know that we really want that out of them. Because 3 feet out of 15 feet wide, I wouldn't consider that a majority. But if you have a giant water main break or a giant construction job where they're in 10 out of this 15 feet, I think they should have to replace the whole thing. So long story short, I guess if they're trenching through it, typically I'm okay with them putting their concrete back the way it is. If they actually have an excavation of a substantial size there, they need to replace, or if they're in a majority of the street slab, I think they need to replace the whole thing.
What about asphalt?
The asphalt's a good one. Currently, it's not usually a problem. On major streets, they are actually told to concrete to grade. Your Kings Highways, your Grands, your Unions, they're told to concrete to grade. Simply because it's a giant nuisance to leave that hole out there an extra 3 or 4 days. So if I have, let's say the water company, up playing around in the middle of Union, I want them to concrete that to grade. Simply because if they leave it, if they pour it 2 inches short, which is what we usually require, then they're gonna pull their stuff off of it. And then hopefully I can get up there tomorrow to patch it. Hopefully, but if it rains, if it's a weekend, if it's something else, then it sits there for 3 or 4 days with this 2-inch dip in the middle of the street. Typically, if you're driving close to the speed limit, you're not gonna tear your car up. But if you're driving 60 miles an hour, as most, or a lot of people do on a lot of these major streets, it becomes an issue. So currently they concrete those to grade. In general, on residentials with asphalt, they leave them down 2 inches. We come in and we patch with hot mix asphalt, and it still doesn't match because the street's 10 years old, and the new patch is put in this morning. Doesn't match, but it's like material.
Okay, let's take questions from the committee. Alderwoman Murphy?
Yes, same thing. I said, so it's our responsibility to make up that 2 inches in asphalt.
Yes.
Okay.
And we charge for that too.
Okay, you charge the
Utility.
The contractor.
utility, okay.
Contractor
Because we
utility.
just had a bunch go through our neighborhood, Wilmington and stuff, and a couple of the patch places were missed, I guess. Maybe a car
Yep.
was over it that day or whatever. And the city came out, the patch guy came out right away and did it again. And to me, that's not a problem. They're usually along the curb line anyway. Cars are usually parked along the, anyway. Obviously, they're not gonna redo the whole street. But it is our responsibility to do it once they're finished.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. And I agree with the other stuff you said. You can't expect them to redo the whole big slab, as long as it's done nice and smooth is what I want.
And it does lead into a little something else too. Like Ameren is typically, assuming they remember, they are, and Jack and, Tamika, I guess, know more about this than probably anybody, because Ameren's lived down here for, I don't know, going on 5 years, if not longer now. They are very good if they go in, but they're usually very substantial. They have a 3 to 5 foot trench going up the center of the road. And then every manhole they have, they also rebuild, so there's usually like a 10 by 10 in every manhole that they have. And not gonna say we get them every time. Usually they come to us saying we wanna pave the whole street to make everybody happy. They pay us for material to pave those major streets. But they're also going down usually the center of the road. And their manholes are usually in the dead center of the road. It's a little different with gas. Gas has helped us out in the past. What was it? It was something over around Lafayette Park. And they told us they weren't going to be there. They're not going there for another 5 years. Or 10 years or whatever it was. And guess what? As soon as we paved it, they came in and started tearing it up.
Right. Well, I said, I still have the floor. We had that same thing happen on Morganford. We got Morganford, then along the cemetery line, I think it was Clegas came in, ripped the whole thing up, and then they concreted back. They did a fairly good job. I had one complaint about it not being as level. But it was just ironic that you said that, because we just experienced that. It happens on Kings Highway all the time, over 14. They do it, and then they dig it up again. Can't. But I concur about trying to match as best as possible. I understand the age problem, but as best as possible. That's good. I'm finished. Thank you.
Alderman Coder.
I've had this issue, I'll just speak to the sidewalk issue. Kent and I talked quite a bit about the state of the streets in the 7th Ward. On the sidewalk, I've had a number of issues, and we've caught some of them to get them fixed, but sometimes they re-pour the sidewalk before we get to them. When someone applies, when a contractor who's maybe doing a whole rehab of a home applies for is there a separate permit to fix the to redo the sidewalk if they choose to do that at their own expense? Just sort of walk me through that process, because I don't know it.
Typically on a big project, they have to apply for what they call Board of Public Service permit first.
Yeah.
That's just kind of the general catch everything caveat. So they're gonna have to have building permits, they're gonna have to have plumbing permits, they're gonna have to have sidewalk permits, they're gonna have to have driveway permits, they're gonna have to have 50 other permits. But in order to get those 50 permits, the first thing you have to do is have your plans in and have to be approved by the Board of Public Service, which I believe is when you guys kind of weigh in on them and go, wait a second, I don't want this in my neighborhood, I want this in my neighborhood. So then typically the construction starts. They run whatever gas lines, water lines, et cetera, into the new building. Sometimes they replace sidewalks, sometimes they don't. Sometimes you never know what the heck they're gonna do until they get to that point, because they ran out of money or something. But yes, those are all supposed to be approved by the street division. They have a plan examiner that goes through them.
Okay.
It kind of varies. Typically, like I said, streets, pushes, exposed, aggregate. But if you're gonna do a complete rehab of an entire block, and there's some white broom or some white picture frame finish across the street, sometimes we'll give in and say, I guess it makes sense because you got a new QT over here. They were approved for everything in white DCC concrete. Everything around here is a hodgepodge. Sometimes they get approved as as going in as regular white concrete.
And so that's where I think the disconnect is. So like this, I agree, could be very helpful for certain neighborhoods. Most of my neighborhoods have a historic code that specifies what color the sidewalk has to be exposed to aggregate. And I think there's often a disconnect between streets, contractors. They'll get the historic stuff right for the building and then, ignore it when it comes to the ground.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we can work on that on a case-by-case basis. For the big developments, I'm making sure to tell them in advance, hey, make sure the sidewalks match. But a couple have slipped by.
Yeah, and like I said, one of our biggest issues currently is the BPS spec. So if this engineering spec, that if any contractor calls me up
Yeah.
and say, what's the spec for sidewalk? And I send it to them, it says white broom finish. At least this way, having an NR permit, we'll have something that says, you know what, yeah, it says white broom finish in that, but your permit stated it should be matching and preferably exposed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Boyd,
No question.
Alderman Bosley.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is, I guess, a little off subject, but I do have a question pertaining to it. When the sidewalk generally is pushed up by the trees, is there a reason why we just don't take down the tree? Because it ends up like a few years later just separating and going the opposite way. They always find a way. So, I mean, not all of them cause that issue, but why don't we take down the tree?
That's a very complex question, because a lot of people like trees. A lot of people don't like trees. What we try to do as part of our 50-50 sidewalk program is we know that there's at least 2 or 3, probably a dozen types of trees that wreak havoc on sidewalks. Sweet gum tree, probably #1 worst tree in the world, as far, maybe not the world, at least in the city, as far as tearing up sidewalks. I can put a new sidewalk in next to a sweet gum tree next year, and it's gonna be raised 3 inches. That's a guarantee. So on those, we always contract forestry. And sweet gum is very, very identifiable tree. Even if you don't know anything about trees, it stands out like a sore thumb. And if it doesn't stand out, you're probably gonna step on one of the balls underneath it and break your ankle. But on any of those, the first thing we do is we call forestry. Forestry will remove sweet gum like that. There's other trees out there. I mean, I've got graft repair in front of my house. I had my sidewalk replaced 7 years ago. It's up about 1 inch already after 7 years. So it's probably something we do need to address a little more with forestry and have them maybe inspect some more, or they inspect a lot of our sites when we call them. The problem is I'm doing 800 to 1,000 sites a year, and it's hard for all of us to keep up because that's their normal crews for other tree issues. And if I pull, I mean, I'd probably be pulling 1 or 2 of their crews, at least 1 or 2 of their arborists to inspect all this all the time. But yeah, it's probably something that needs to be looked at a little more in depth from the forestry perspective and streets perspective, as far as making sure we are on the same page on every one of these locations, because it's a lot easier for both of us. If I pull the sidewalk out and they look at the tree and say, you know what, that tree needs to go, they can pull that out. I think in general, we're gonna keep the trees in the tree line because it beautifies the city, it's good for everybody's health, etc.
Understood. I wasn't talking about removing them all or, a large amount of them, just the ones that, like really affect, like I have a few people to where their properties are really affected by it. The sidewalk is shifted. They just came out and fixed it about 4 years ago, but, that's problematic because they already cut the roots and they just do somewhere else. So.
And that's kind of a misnomer too. It's when you cut tree roots, they grow back faster. Just like cutting your hair, it grows back faster. So, and we cut tree roots, of course, in order to get sidewalk slabs back in. And so that's part of the issue. The other issue is, I know Ward 16 is renowned for it. I know St. Louis Avenue in general. There are some giant trees over there. And probably, if you look back 100 years ago, you probably shouldn't plant an oak tree that's gonna get 150 foot tall in a 4-foot tree line. That probably wasn't the greatest idea. But on the other hand, we have a great looking tree in front of my house. And trying to take down a 100-year-old oak tree is usually not something the homeowner wants. Is what I ran into. I did a sidewalk probably 4 or 5 years ago. A homeowner on St. Louis Avenue. The homeowner did not want this tree to come down. This sidewalk was raised probably 18 inches, 24 inches. I mean, I haven't been back by there, but I'd almost guarantee it's probably very similar today.
Just a question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Alderwoman Martin.
Good morning, thanks for being here.
Good morning, no problem.
So I know we talked a little bit about this in my budget hearing when I first got here too, but would it help, just thinking long term, not today, no one freak out, but would it help sometime in the future to have inspectors that are, and I'm talking more about the streets, not the sidewalks, but just since we're on this patching topic, would it help to have some inspectors dedicated to this that can go around and say, hey, Ameren or Laclede, Spire, whatever, you didn't patch this correctly. You need to redo it. I mean, sidewalks too, maybe.
Yep, we do that already. We have between 7 and 8, it's supposed to be 8, but right now I got 7 city inspectors. Anybody who gets a permit, their jobs get inspected by us. That includes all your major utilities, Joe's Plumbing up the street that does a sewer lateral, whatever it would happen to be. So we inspect, won't say every job, but it should be at least 95 to 100% of every job that happens in the city. Of the legal contractors.
Right.
The ones that
We're
decide to do
familiar.
their own work on a Tuesday afternoon or a Saturday, not much I can do to those guys, because of course the homeowner's never gonna rat out their contractor, so. But yeah, I mean, typically, most of our failures are from jobs that we don't have permits on. Occasionally, we have them from the people that are trying to do things right by pulling permits, et cetera, but most of the failures, if you look them up, there was never any work done at this address per
So can
permit.
there be anything done to, I guess, sort of punitive to those who, say I call in with a complaint, they say, hey, this doesn't match, like clearly this it's not right. You send someone out, they say, there was never a permit pulled on this. I mean, do you think that would help? Or it's just gonna be another thing that's not,
I mean, the biggest problem is trying to figure out who it was. I mean, if I can figure out who it is, I mean, it almost has to be a financial issue there, because I can't withhold their permits because they're not getting them anyway.
right?
Good point.
That's kinda how we.
So yeah, maybe, typically on those, I can't get a name from anybody though. They show up in a white pickup with unmarked everything, their dump truck, anything that
But
they
you know
have out there.
whose residence it is, though.
Yeah, is the resident
The
responsible?
homeowner, or the landlord, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I have a hard time with that typically, just personally, because I hire a contractor as a homeowner. He tells me and sells me a bill of goods that he's doing everything right. End up finding out that he doesn't, so you're gonna hold me financially accountable for his issues?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose though they should know that they have to get a permit. I mean, I know if the contractor I hire has a permit or not.
Yeah, I would hope so, but it's never the story again, so.
Right, of course. All right.
Sure it is.
No, that would be another fine topic, I think, and I would be very, very interested in finding something to do with that, but I honestly don't have any idea how to pursue something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, my experience, Alderwoman Martin, is that a lot of seniors especially, they don't understand about permits. And the contractor come and they say, oh, I'm gonna get all the permits, I'm gonna do everything, and they don't think to ask them for copies of the permits. And then they have a fence put up that falls over 6 months later because they didn't dig down 36 inches and pour concrete and all of that. It would be nice if we could get the word out and people would capture it and keep it
Yeah.
and know this what needs to happen. Okay, so, tell me how long it's gonna take, to implement this policy?
It should be on our permits by the end of the week.
Okay, so I will hold this bill pending a copy of the new policy.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty, so we've heard Board Bill 120 today. Next Board Bill we will hear, Alderman Roddy is not here, and he wanted me to go ahead and handle his bill for him. So next Board Bill is Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderman Joe Roddy, which is vacating the subsurface rights of vehicle and pedestrian traffic adjacent to 4001 through 4007 Chouteau, beginning at Sarah and extending eastwardly. And I believe he said there's a development going on in the area, and there's a need for that. You have some additional
There's a
information?
map for the
Okay.
area. That's all, that's what I have.
Alrighty, so if anybody would like to, does anybody want to see a map of that particular location? It's being vacated by 4001 Investors LLC. It's an irregular shaped parcel.
So this parcel here, okay.
Don't hit the mic, that makes it very loud.
So he's talking about.
Okay. I'm gonna call on Alderman Murphy when she finishes.
No, I see, it seems all right. No, I don't have any questions, I think it seems.
Yeah. Alderman
Okay, so I'm
Coder.
right here.
Alderman Coder, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Alderwoman Pam Boyd.
No question.
Okay, Alderman Bosley.
No, sir.
Alderman Martin.
No questions.
Okay, no further questions. I'll entertain a motion to pass Board Bill 118 out of committee with due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Holden.
Did you second?
Yes, sir.
Alderman Conway, Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderman Kotar,
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd,
Aye.
Alderman Bosley,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
6 aye votes do pass.
Okay, Alderman Green is not here. We're gonna hold Alderman Arnowitz bill. So let's hear from, I know he was here, but there's something he needs to do to his bill.
Okay, I see, because I'll do it for
Yeah,
him.
so
It's in my ward.
We'll fix it and hear
Okay.
it next week. It's in your ward.
Yeah, the street is in my, the fellow grew up in my ward. They're friends. It was,
Okay,
you know, it's all good. I'm saying I would handle it if you want me to.
all right. It's your ward,
You
right?
know Larry. There you go.
You just confused the committee. Normally it's
Larry dressed
Alderman.
up today too, he's not even wearing basketball shorts.
Right. Got long pants on.
Okay, so we're gonna hear from the Director of Parking Operations, and is the treasurer here?
She has another engagement,
You
so I'll
guys
be in
sound
her
like sore
place.
about this, like nowhere near.
Okay. Carl, would you mind taking the seat?
Sure, I'll be speaking to Carl.
Okay, and just to be clear, Jared, we want to hear from the treasurer. When there was a request for them to hear from the parking commission, it is our desire to hear from the treasurer, not a representative from staff. And if we can't hear from the treasurer, it would be nice if we can get some correspondence that says, I'm sorry, I have a previous engagement, I'm available on these times, and give us some options. Is that okay?
Okay, but I do understand that the meeting was scheduled without getting input as to her schedule.
I understand, but there's been a lot of correspondence with the treasurer with no correspondence coming back. So I get that, I understand that. And it's hard to communicate with somebody when they don't communicate back with you. Would you agree? Yes or
Alright.
no?
Communication is a two-way street.
Thank you. Okay, so Carl, where we left off back in June, if I remember correctly, Alderman Vaccaro, there was a discussion about the 30 days. Correct. There was a discussion about the 30 days in appeal process, and it was a little bit complicated. There was the state of Missouri, there's for 30 days, so on and so forth. And there was a request to really, not do the board bill because this is something that should be done administratively at the parking commission. And if I remember correctly, Jared, it was you that said that something will be done by the end of the summer. Is that correct?
I said that I would bring some recommendations to the parking commission
By when?
on this issue.
By the end of the summer.
I stated I would look into this issue and we'd bring recommendations on this issue.
Jared, you said that you would have some recommendations, you guys would basically work on this and fix this by the end of the summer. That is what you said. And you guys knew that this board bill, that Alderman Vaccaro said, hey, look, if you guys don't do what you promised to do, I'm gonna pass the board bill. Do you remember that conversation?
I recall us discussing the bill and the various means by which it could be implemented. Yes, I do recall that.
Okay, and do you recall Alderman Vaccaro basically agreeing that he will hold this bill pending you guys fixing it at the parking commission?
I told him that state law states that this is the type of issue that should be handled at the parking commission, and that I would be happy to discuss this issue with the parking commission. We briefly discussed this issue at the last meeting, and the parking commission was receptive to looking into this issue. Since that time, we've actually been sued. Alderman Boyd is one of the people who's bringing suit against our office, so it has made doing business at the parking commission level difficult, and so that has been an intervening thing that has kind of slowed us down on an issue like this.
So you're saying because the parking commission is being sued, business kind of stops?
Well, we're waiting on clarity from the court on this issue. We were hoping to get something sooner than we have, but the parking commission essentially has been sued in essence to say it's unconstitutional or in violation of Missouri constitutional law. So we're hoping to get clarity and efforts to move forward. This is something, like I said, once we get a ruling that we think will be favorable, is something that we'd be happy to bring a recommendation to the parking commission on this, since we have done some research on this issue. So with regard to Alderman Vaccaro's bill, we're already in compliance with the first portion of the bill. 2015, we pushed back the time that people had to pay before incurring a penalty from 15 days to 22 days. So we're actually past the marker that he sets for 20 days in Section 1. In Section 2, he talks about waiting, I guess, until someone, or freezing, or making sure that no one receives a penalty until someone has had the opportunity to adjudicate their ticket. And we already freeze somebody's ticket if they choose to appeal their ticket, even if the appeal takes place after the 22nd day. The small sliver of people that potentially would be affected by a change that's suggested by Alderman Vaccaro are the people who wait until the 30th day to contest their bill or contest their parking violation, and they may or may not have incurred a penalty at that time. It's difficult for us to get a full flavor as to kind of the fiscal impact, because our administrative hearing officers do have the ability to waive that penalty. But if we were just to say push back the penalty phase to 30 days, that would have a fiscal impact that would reduce the amount of revenue that we're able to collect based on parking tickets, and inevitably transfer general revenue as well.
Explain that. How would it have a negative impact?
So for tickets that are received after the for tickets that haven't been paid by the 22nd day, contestants receive a penalty. So if we look at the percentage of tickets that are paid between the 22nd and 30th day, that comes out to about $653,000 based on last fiscal year. So if you were to push that penalty back for everyone until the 30th day, you'd be essentially cutting that number in half. I think it makes sense from a preliminary recommendation standpoint to give everyone who contests their ticket to freeze their penalty. That would be, I think, a recommendation that would both strike a balance between fairness and not reducing, significantly reducing the amount of revenue that we're able to collect and transfer to the general fund. So, like I said, for folks who appeal their ticket between the 23rd and 30th day, it's hard to tell, kind of, like I said, if all of those people are getting the benefit of the doubt with parking administrative hearings because they do have, like I said, the ability to waive that penalty, but in kind of efforts to be fair, it seems a very reasonable recommendation to just automatically freeze their penalty if they are between the 23rd and 30th day, if they choose to appeal their parking ticket.
Before I take questions from the committee, Jared, so you're saying that the parking commission has had conversation about this issue?
I didn't say the parking commission, I said I would bring back a I would bring back recommendations to the parking commission on this issue.
And when were you proposing to bring recommendations?
I was hoping to bring them by the summer. However, as I stated before, that was before intervening events have temporarily interrupted parking commission business.
In what way?
The essence, the legality of the parking commission is in doubt.
Okay, but until a court rules that the parking commission is not valid, we operate under the current law in the system. Am I correct?
That's the hope.
No, it's not about a hope.
Well,
it's a binary answer. It's either yes or no. We operate under the current statute and ordinances, or we don't, right?
Well, I would hope that if a court stated that structure was illegal, that they would not take retroactive or look at measures retroactively. So, as I stated before, we are hopefully going to get some guidance from the court on this issue and hopefully be able to get back to addressing these type of issues.
So let me ask you this. So is the treasurer of the opinion that we will not have any parking commission meetings until a court rules on the lawsuit?
At this time, I believe, like I said, we're waiting for guidance from the court on this issue.
Okay, but the city councilor has basically, going back to board bill number 4, has ruled that we're within our rights to enact that as an ordinance. So that's the city council for the city of St. Louis that have, basically said it's okay to do that. I am concerned that there are no parking commissions being held because of a court case. That makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. None. And I just think that that's just being obstructionist in my mind to not have meetings, and it's irresponsible. Because the parking commission should have meetings every month. The parking commission is spending money monthly. They're bringing in revenues and they're spending money. And right now, without having meetings, they're saying there's no oversight. Would you not agree?
I would not agree with several of the statements you made.
Go ahead.
First being the ability to effectuate these type of changes without parking commission. Have not seen any correspondence from the city councilor to the contrary. 1, 2, I think it's a little difficult to say that we are obstructionists when we're trying to do our jobs, yet people are bringing lawsuits against us for doing our jobs. So, and three, we're continuing to operate within, you know, the budget that was passed, both on the expenditure side and so, and as essentially operating under the status quo. So that is kind of where we are, and hopefully these things will get resolved so that we can get back to doing our jobs and
But no one
continuing
knows
to
how
improve
long
our
it will take
business.
before a judge rules, and let's suppose it could be a year. So what you're suggesting is that the parking commission basically doesn't need to have any meetings, you know, for as long as it takes a judge to rule. Is that what I'm hearing?
Like I said, we were hoping to get a ruling earlier, and as I stated, we're in a wait and see mode right
I
now.
understand what your hopes are. That's not what I'm asking. So is the treasurer of the opinion that there will be no parking commission meetings until a judge rules?
I cannot say yes or no at this point. All I can say is we are currently waiting on guidance from the court on this issue.
Okay, but the parking commission is receiving revenues and expending revenues, right? If there are no meetings, then no one's looking at what's going on financially with the organization, right?
As I stated before, you know, we're waiting to get back to normal. Our business is operating under the rules and regulations that are currently in place.
That's not necessarily 100% true, right? Because the state statute requires that the parking commission receives financial reports on a monthly basis, right?
I can't speak to what I don't have that provision in front of me.
Now, Jared, you're playing games, but that's okay. Because you know what the state statute says. Now, would you like me to pause and go get the state statute for you?
Let me see if I can, I don't have it with me. Let's see if I can pull it up. It says she'll provide the comptroller with monthly reports on all parking revenue collected by the city.
It doesn't say commissioners. It just says comptroller.
It says the treasurer of any city not within a county shall be the parking supervisor, also known as the supervisor of parking meters for any parking facility or space owned in whole or part, leased or managed. And then it goes on to talk about duties, establishing with the parking commission, and it says to provide, number 5 says, shall provide the comptroller with monthly reports on all parking revenues collected by the city.
Okay, so it doesn't say anything about the parking commissioners.
That is what the parking commission / duties of the city treasurer are under 82-487.
And there's another statute also, right, under 84. That
There's
talks about the parking commission.
82-487 speaks to the parking commission, and 82-485 speaks to the supervisor of parking.
So what is the duties and responsibilities of the parking commission?
The duties and responsibilities of the parking commission. Okay. guidelines, number one is guidelines governing the administrative adjudication, disposition, and collection of any parking violations. This is 82487. Budget modifications for the parking fund, the acquisition, development, regulation, and operation of such parking facilities, spaces owned in whole or in part. The treasurer, supervisor, treasurer not within a city shall be the parking supervisor, also known as the supervisor of parking meters. Parking commission shall establish joint public-private partnerships, supervise the acquisition, development, and operation of parking facilities, make and pay contracts or other obligations, supervise any other on-street and off-street parking programs and assets, provide the comptroller with reports of all parking revenues collected by the city, make biannual installment payments to the general fund transfer subject to parking commission approval, and provide the comptroller and treasurer with monthly reports of all parking revenue.
Okay, and one of the things you talked about is budget modifications, right?
Yes.
So how would the parking commission know there's a need for a budget modification if there are no financial reports being discussed?
Well, a budget modification, I think would, if it has to go before the parking commission, it would have to be requested. I guess that would require spending outside of a budget line item that's already been approved.
So you are of the opinion that there's no need for parking commission meetings because you're just operating business as usual, and so therefore the parking commission really has no role.
I did not say that, one, and two, like I said, we are temporarily having difficulty moving beyond the status quo until we get some guidance from the court. So
I didn't hear you read it, but I'm sure it's in a state statute that you also are governed by any local ordinances.
okay.
Okay, and so if you're governed by local ordinances, then you know that certainly currently Board Bill 92, and we'll just go with the current ordinance, it says that we shall have monthly meetings. The parking commission shall means it's absolute, correct? You're a lawyer, Jared. Is shall absolute or not absolute?
Well, it also has to take into account, whether or not it affects state law or contradicts state law, so.
If we enact an ordinance, we are the legislative body. The city of St. Louis enacts an ordinance and the mayor signs off on it. You're saying if you disagree with it, you don't have to adhere to it. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I don't think that's the case.
Okay, is that ordinance in court right now?
That ordinance, I don't think it's in court.
Okay,
right
so
now.
it's law, right?
It's an ordinance.
It's law.
Okay.
Okay, so if it's law, it says shall have monthly meetings. It also says there shall be financial reports given to commissioners. Okay, so if you're not giving financial reports to commissioners, you're in violation. And that was in the previous ordinance before Board Bill 92, right?
In the budget.
Financial reports, that each commissioner will have a copy of the financial report, was in the previous ordinance, right?
The previous ordinance, the budget ordinance.
The code for the parking commission. I forget the number, but the ordinance that governs the parking commission.
Okay.
It did state that, right?
I would have to go back and look at that.
We can go back and play the tape because I brought it up at the first and only parking commission meeting that I've attended on June 8th. Do you remember that conversation?
I do not remember. I recall you requesting financial statements and having a discussion about that.
Right, and you don't remember me quoting the ordinance that stated that.
Don't remember that at
But
this
what I
time.
remember you saying, oh, well, it was back when we were doing paper. Right now it's electronically, so we send it over to the comptroller's office, and therefore you didn't find a reason that the commissioners should have it, or you just didn't do it because you wasn't used to doing it. You don't remember that conversation?
I think the issue was the reports to the comptroller, and as I stated, the comptroller processes all our payments already, so no, from a custom perspective, we never gave them a, concise report because they processed all of our payments.
Okay, but I was talking about the reports to be given to the commissioners, not the report that was given to the comptroller. The ordinance said the commissioners will get a copy of the financial report. Do you remember having that? Do you remember requesting that information?
I remember the conversation about financial documents, yes.
Do you remember me specifically requesting monthly financial reports?
I do.
Okay, and so it's my understanding, unless people got them besides me, that there has not been a financial report that's been distributed to the parking commissioners. Are you aware of any?
As I stated before, we're on a hold on parking commission issues until we get some guidance from the court.
So what you're saying is you're gonna do what you wanna do at the parking commission. If someone asks for information from the parking commission, that you're gonna not give that information because of the lawsuit. Even though the charter requires you to turn over documents, even though the state statute and the Sunshine Act requires you to turn over documents, you're stating that basically you're not gonna do any of that stuff until the lawsuit is resolved.
I can't say that we're not going to do,
But you haven't been doing it.
like I said, we're waiting on guidance from the court. We're hopeful to get back
Okay,
to normal
Jared, this
parking
is what I'm
commission
gonna
business.
do. I'm gonna have another hearing on Thursday, and I wanna talk to the treasurer. Is the treasurer in town?
I'd have to check her schedule.
Could you?
Sure.
I mean, before we end this meeting, can you check her schedule and see if she's in town? We'll
Uh,
wait.
I will put in a call and see what her schedule is. But I do think she's, I will double check.
Okay, you can step out if you like and make the call.
Okay. Are there any other issues?
We're gonna talk more about this process after I get an understanding of what the parking commission is doing. Because I heard you say you've made some changes or what have you, but as a member of the parking commission, there's been no discussions about the adjudication of parking fines in accordance with what Board Bill number 40 is trying to do. It would be nice to have that conversation as a parking commission. I would even welcome the opportunity for Alderman Vaccaro to participate and have that discussion at the parking commission, because I prefer not to pass Board Bill number 40 if it could be done at the parking commission. But what's not responsible is to not have parking commission meetings to affect a policy change because of a lawsuit. That's what's not acceptable. And I would prefer, again, not to pass ordinances, just like Board Bill 120. The mayor's office is asking, hey, let's do a policy change so that you don't have to do an ordinance, because this is something we really should be doing anyway, and I support that. Just as I support not doing Board Bill 40 if it can be done at the parking commission level. But the parking commission absolutely has to have meetings in order to effectuate change, correct?
Like I said, yes, it would be great to go back to operating, but it also, like I said, requires that the parking commission act legally. We believe it does, in efforts to, like I said, move beyond the status quo. We're hoping to resolve the legality of the parking commission.
Okay, let me go ahead and take some questions from the committee real quick, and then I'll let you go ahead and step out and see if we can organize this a time for Thursday, okay? Alderwoman Murphy.
No, I guess I don't have any questions, because I think you asked them, and I'm thoroughly confused about why there's not parking commissioner meetings regardless of any legal goings on, because the law is the law as it stands right now. And it seems to me why have a parking commission if we're not going to meet and discuss things? So other than that, I really have no questions then, because
Okay.
it already has been talked about.
Thank you. Alderman Kohler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So first I want to talk about the tickets, because that's ultimately, I think, what we're
Yeah.
here to talk about. So between day 22 and 30, the revenues from those tickets, those fines is roughly $653,000 a year, is that right?
Just to clarify, it's actually between day 23 and 30.
Day 23
You
and
have
30,
until
okay.
the 22nd day to pay a ticket without
So
incurring.
between day 23 and 30, which is a doubled ticket, the revenues, is that a projection or is that from last year?
That's from last fiscal year.
Okay, so $653,000 was generated from people paying their ticket between day 23 and day 30.
Correct.
Okay, and that's a double ticket, so a $15 ticket, they're paying a $30 ticket.
Correct.
Do we have any numbers on how many people filed for an appeal within that same time frame?
I don't have those numbers offhand,
Could
and
you get those for us?
I could look at them, but,
We didn't request that.
Because
It's-
but
it's
we're
not
not
a
talking
huge
about a
number.
huge number of people, right?
8%.
So that's the
Well,
folks I'm interested in,
Sure.
is those
Yeah.
folks who decide they want to appeal, but they don't decide till day 27 or day 30.
Okay.
And I certainly understand that in many of those instances, I would hope administrative judges are waiving any doubled fee. Now, if they ultimately don't prevail in their appeal, I'd be curious as well, if, in the instances where when we find out how many people filed an appeal between day 23 and 30, I'd also be interested to know, sort of, I guess, the outcomes of those appeals. Are they ultimately paying a $30 ticket or a $15 ticket when they lose on appeal?
So the seventh and fine, they put a 60-day freeze on. So if a citizen calls up and they have a $15 expired meter ticket, they put 2 months on it. So if they call, today is what, the 12th? So they would go until November the 12th, they would freeze that ticket. It's auto-generated. So if they called on the 23rd day,
Yeah.
it would be $30.
Okay.
If the adjudicator rules that the citizen is correct, it would go back to 0.
Right.
Yes.
But if they're not correct, which is usually, they will lose the appeal. I mean, I think we can all agree, most of the time, citizens are not gonna prevail on these appeals. But because they waited until that 23rd day, they're paying the double ticket now. So we still, in my mind, there's still some inequity here, just that we're not lining up the timeframes. I don't have a problem with the ticket doubling. I just have a problem with it not doubling in line with the 30 days that you're allowed under state law to appeal. That's where my issue lies.
so you're talking about the appeal to circuit court? Are you talking about the appeal to circuit court or the appeal at the administrative hearing level?
Even the appeal at the administrative
Okay.
hearing level.
So and I understand, and it's, like I said, it's a little difficult to really have to go through almost each individual ruling, because sometimes when they rule liable, the administrative hearing officer does have the discretion to waive a penalty and find someone liable if they don't prevail.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there are some instances when they're waiving penalties, but that's discretionary. So it's not we don't, like I said, I would have to actually delve into almost all of the rulings, because like I said, sometimes it will say liable, but a penalty has been waived.
So can you guys, and I get we've spent quite a bit of time on this, and whether it's the parking commission or the board of aldermen who's supposed to fix this discrepancy in the time frame, can you at least get us, for the last 2 years, the number of people who filed for an appeal between day 23 and 30? I don't even care what the outcome was at this point, just, are we talking about 1,000 people, 100
Sure.
people?
It's
You know,
not, it's not gonna be a
Okay.
substantial number.
I'd be curious to know that number, if you could,
Okay.
just for the past couple of years, don't have to go-
23 and 30.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
between day 23 and 30. All right, so I guess my next question is, and I'll be brief on this, I don't want to obviously get into the details of ongoing litigation, and I wouldn't put you in that position, Jared, but we're talking about, there's one big lawsuit, right? The one filed in January of this year?
I believe former city councilor filed a lawsuit.
Right, the one Elkin
And then-
Kistner's representing them on?
Correct.
And
And
that was
then
filed in January.
subsequently, Alderman Boyd joined that lawsuit.
He intervened sometime in, before we went down, right when we were going on break, right?
Okay.
I think, if my time frame is correct. But so, this lawsuit's been on file since January, the city was served sometime in February. You guys have had parking commission meetings while this litigation is pending.
Yes.
Okay, and so, but now, is it the position that you're not gonna call any more parking commission meetings until there's a ruling in this litigation?
We haven't had any subsequent meetings, one, since Alderman Boyd joined the suit, two, we haven't gotten clarity from the city councilor's office. They may, in terms of the position they're taking, so the legality of the parking commission is kind of in question more so than I think it was at the beginning of this
And
lawsuit.
I get that, but until there's a ruling and we exhaust any appeals on that ruling, we've got an existing framework for the parking commission to operate, do we not?
We
There's
have
no-
a framework that, like I said, we believe is legal and hope to prevail in court.
And those stays have been, the judge hasn't placed any stays on the parking commission doing any business, have they?
No,
Okay.
not to my knowledge.
And so you've got a meeting, looking at the city website, scheduled for October 12th. Is parking commission planning on meeting on October 12th?
That is the hope. As I stated, we're still in a wait-and-see mode. We were thinking that we were going to receive a ruling from Judge Durker at this point, and we have not received a ruling yet.
Okay. And are you guys briefing this? Are we still in discovery? Where are we in this process?
He has all the papers on the
Okay.
motion to dismiss stage.
All right. So we're not waiting on any reply briefs at this
No.
point, just waiting on the judge?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. And then you've also got a meeting, I guess, scheduled for December 14th that's already been published on the website, but I guess is it the same answer that you're waiting to see what the judge decides?
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, I'm hopeful that in advance of that, we can let's at least get this number figured out. So what ultimately brought us all here was this appeals process, so I'd be curious to know those numbers, if you could please provide those.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, Alderwoman Boyd.
Okay, I'm confused. Because, Leonard told us some, street committee meetings prior that you all have a reduction in tickets.
Correct. So
Okay, so is this part of, is it less tickets you all are getting or more tickets?
So no, we, since introducing the new on-street technology, the new meters, we've seen a substantial decrease in the number of tickets we actually write. So that's correct. So we used to write in upwards of 380,000 tickets. Now we write around 300,000 tickets.
About 100,000 less.
Well, 60 to 80,000 less a year.
Yeah.
Okay, and so who decides if say a resident wants to appeal the parking ticket, who decides if the ticket is justified or not to be appealed?
An administrative hearing officer is the person that deals with that case. It's not an employee of our office. They're an attorney that works in a part-time contractor capacity to hear those cases.
Okay, and so I guess my question is, I'm back to the other members. You all met from January to June, you met in that time frame. And so an ordinance was passed, and so you don't think that you need to just keep meeting to make sure that people are aware of what's going on?
As I stated before, we would like to get back to doing parking commission business. Hopefully, once we kind of clear the legality of the entire structure of the parking commission, we can do that.
So to me, that's kind of, you're kind of contradicting yourself, because as a lawyer, you're not non-compliance of an ordinance that was passed. But you're saying that you're waiting on the courts, so it's kind of, to me, it's contradictory, and maybe I'm not understanding that. Because the ordinance is that you all have the meetings and you do the reports, but you're saying you're waiting on a judgment, and so you're not. And so in that judgment, does it state you don't meet until the judgment is passed, or maybe I'm asking the wrong question, it's not making sense?
No. So the lawsuit calls into question the entire existence and legality of the parking commission. So before we take any additional actions, we want to make sure that we're, as we think, operating correctly under state law and local law.
Okay, so if you have a meeting how would that conflict from you not going within the law? That's
Well,
what I'm not
sure.
understanding.
But the lawsuit calls into question potentially any actions taken by the parking commission.
Okay, it's still not clear, so it's something I'm missing, because it's not making sense, because you still can have a meeting, and you could be within the law, and so that's why I say it's not making sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not clear on it. Okay, that's all I have, Jeff.
Okay, Alderman Bosley.
How you guys doing today?
Good morning.
Sounds like the question, I think, Alderwoman Boyd is asking is, why don't you want to have parking commission meetings regardless of the law or anything, period? Why wouldn't you want to meet and talk, just in general?
I guess we would like to not just meet, but actually take up business like this without the threat of it being declared unconstitutional or illegal. So
So what do you mean, like when you have a meeting itself, it can be declared unconstitutional just because you wanted to meet together and conduct business as a commission, or what?
not necessarily, but if we were to pass significant changes to our administrative hearing process, that very act could, like I said, be declared unconstitutional or in violation of the kind of legal issues that are brought up by Alderman Boyd's lawsuit. So
You don't think it'd be easier to work those out in a meeting together, though, without even having to take it to court?
I wholeheartedly would hope that we could deal with issues outside of court. We didn't anticipate a lawsuit brought by a parking commissioner, and as I stated before, would like to get back to doing business without the cloud of it being declared void.
So can you still not meet? I mean, the judge hasn't pounded the gavel yet, so things can still be ironed out, I would think.
That would be the hope, in the sense of being able to do business. But like I said, until we get some clarity, we want to, before enacting anything that would change the, current parking regime, we don't want it declared void. So like I said, we were hopeful to get a ruling earlier than this, but we have not.
So I just want to put out there, man, we fight a lot. Seriously. There's a lot going on outside these walls, man. So we need to have as many conversations as possible with each other, in every possible way, because the city itself has a lot of issues. So the more conversations we have with people who actually have the ability to make changes, the more changes we actually see. The more time we spend in the room arguing over things, the longer it takes for us to get things done. There's a lot going on. I would just love to see everybody kind of just starting to really do what we can to iron out our issues amongst each other instead of going to the extreme. So whatever we can do to start at least having the conversation. It doesn't have to be a commissioner's meeting, whatever we need to do to get to the table, man. Like, this is a lot of time.
All right.
And just to tap on the 23rd and 30-day thing, I don't think it's okay to be focused on making revenue off the people in the city. I think we should focus on what's right and what's wrong. And we morally know it's wrong. If I let you borrow some money and I tell you, hey, pay me back in 21 days. You have 30 days to pay me back. But on the 21st day, I'm gonna double it up on you. That it just sounds, it's not right. And that's pretty much what we saying. We strong on me and telling you, pay it by the 21st day, but you got 30 days to pay it, seriously. But if you don't pay it on the 21st day, you're gonna get a penalty for it. I just think we shouldn't be focused on the revenue aspect of it. We should be focusing on kind of what's right and what's morally wrong. We all see a lot of things that are wrong and right in the city. We're always talking about we want to change this or change that. When we see something that's wrong, and we make up these laws. Let's just make the change and keep it pushing. Thank you.
Okay. Again, Jared, you're a lawyer, right?
Yes.
Okay, so, just to continue the conversation with Alderman Holder. So a lawsuit was filed in February, correct? Against the Park Commission.
I recall in the
January,
winter.
February, right,
Gotcha.
okay. And did it stop the Parking Commission from doing any business, from enacting any policies?
We had subsequent meetings.
Actually passed the budget, right? Okay, so what's different? There's still a lawsuit, but the administration of the parking division has decided not to have any more meetings. So what's different? A lawsuit is a lawsuit, right? It's the same lawsuit, right?
No, it's not the same
It's not.
lawsuit.
It's not, they're suing under the same principle.
One
Without
of
discussing the lawsuit.
one of the parking commissioners has joined the lawsuit.
I
So
have.
You have joined the lawsuit, so the lawsuit is significantly different. And then two, the city may take, we're still waiting on the position that the city councilor is going to take on this position. So, yes,
Okay,
the
so-
lawsuit is different.
So you are of the opinion that if the parking commission does business, like it should be doing business and having meetings, that if the judge ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, that it will undo everything the parking commission has ever done?
I don't know, the judge's ruling would have to address whether or not issues retroactive would be affected. And there are issues that, for instance, the increase in fine structure, that is at issue. So there is some looking backwards within the lawsuit.
Okay, so why don't we just stop doing business as a parking commission until the lawsuit is settled? Stop issuing tickets, stop functioning as a parking division. Because there's a lawsuit. They may overturn all those parking tickets that you've issued, right?
No, that's not the hope, one.
No, I
but
know it's not
two,
the hope, but based on your logic, that could happen, right? Because you can't have it both ways, Jared.
As I stated before, we are operating under the status quo until we get clarity from
So explain what the
court.
status quo is, so we're clear. What is the status quo?
Operating under the current system and not essentially implementing any new changes
Okay.
at the parking
So the
commission.
status quo was to have parking commission meetings every other month, correct?
That was not, well, as needed. The status quo was to have parking commission meetings
Oh, as needed? Is that what's published? Parking commission meetings will be had as needed?
I don't think it was, as I stated before, under both Treasurer Williams and Treasurer Jones, they were held as needed.
Well, if I remember correctly, there was monthly parking commission meetings under Larry Williams.
That's
And-
incorrect.
And currently, there's a website for the parking commission that posts every meeting for the year. Is that correct?
It is, the parking commission meetings are on our website.
Okay, so from a public perception, there's a meeting held every other month. Would you agree?
Typically, meetings are held every other month, but they're held typically as needed, and that was the way it was done under Treasurer Williams as well.
Okay, and so the way we did business 40 years ago, we don't need to change that. We just keep that type of status quo up. The way we did business, even 2 years ago, we just maintain that status quo, as you say.
I don't understand that.
Okay. You said we're operating on the status quo. The status quo is you had meetings every other month. Now, you're right, because when I look back at the minutes, the parking commission last year had like 4 or 5 meetings, and the year before it had about the same. I'm off by one somewhere, one of those years. But they had at least 4 meetings a year. So the status quo is in general to meet. Right?
It-
Let me ask you this. Who controls the parking department or division? Whose authority is that under?
Whose authority, so In what respect? So it's under.
Who has the responsibility for everything that happens with the parking division?
Supervisor of parking manages the division, subject to parking commission oversight on the budget and other rules as set forth in the statute.
Right. So the parking commission controls the parking division, right?
To a certain
They
extent.
set, no, it's not to a certain extent. If you look at the state statute, they set policy and procedures for the parking division, correct?
When you say control, like I said,
They're
there's a
the oversight,
delegation,
right?
there's a delegation of authority within the state statute as to the
Who
parking
manages
division.
day to day, which is the treasurer, right?
Yes.
So we're not talking about that. So she's the supervisor currently. Tashara Jones is the supervisor. But who is fiduciarily responsible for the actions of the parking division?
As I said, the parking commission, like I said, have responsibilities set forth in state law, and those responsibilities, like I said, deal with the budget and other issues.
So the parking commission is set up by state statute that has all authority to effectuate policy, correct?
It, like I said, it deals with, it's in
Don't,
state
Jared,
statute.
don't say like I said. Please stop that. Please stop talking to me with this legal mumbo jumbo stuff. It's either yes or no. The parking commission is the governing body of the parking division. Yes or no?
As I said, the state law speaks for itself. I
It
told
is.
you guys
When you
what
get through
the-
talking, I'm telling you, and I'm not a lawyer, and I bet you I'll beat you on this. The parking commission is the authority for the parking division, which is delegated, and by state statute, the parking supervisor, whoever that treasurer is delegated to manage the day-to-day operations. At the end of the day, the parking commission should be meeting monthly. They should, unquestionably. There should be a monthly meeting, regardless if there's any policy changes or what. We cannot get past this situation with Board Bill number 40 if there's no meeting. You have no idea when Judge Durker will rule. He could be December, it could be January, it could be tomorrow. But at the end of the day, there's a responsibility to the public that we all do our job. You don't think that's important? Because
Like-
you're picking and choosing what you want to do, what kind of information you want to provide, and when you want to meet. So that sounds like to me dereliction of duties. Alderman Kohler asked you for a report. Do you plan to submit that report to him?
A report, I said I would be happy to provide him with the information he asked on that question.
Okay, so you will provide that information, right? But I asked for a financial report, and you're not willing to give a financial report to me.
I can't speak to unwillingness. Like I said, we're going to be trying to get back to parking commission business as soon as possible.
You're double talking, Jared. Now, you just said you'll give him the information that he requested, but you won't give me the information I requested until we get back to doing business as a parking commission based on a judge ruling, basically, right?
I didn't.
So you're picking and
No,
choosing what you do.
I will get back to you on the information you've requested, but Alderman Coder asked me for that information, and I committed to provide it.
But you won't provide it to me.
I can't say that I won't provide you with information.
But you're making no commitment to do it.
As I stated before, I'll go back and talk in our office about any information that you've requested.
Okay.
Being mindful of the fact that you are bringing a lawsuit against our office.
That
so-
has nothing to do with you doing your job, Jared. Nothing. There are people who bring sexual harassment suits against their employer and still stay there and work. There are people that sue different companies and still do business with them because it's a contractual obligation. And then you let the chips fall where they may, right?
I think those lawsuits are different, but
But again, we'll pick and choose
Sure.
what type of lawsuit fits your scenario. Okay, so I would like to have a meeting Thursday. Will you please let me know? We're gonna hold the committee open, and would you please, you can step out and contact the treasurer and ask her if she's available Thursday?
will do.
Thank you. So Carl, let me
Yes.
ask you this.
Sure.
So you've been doing this parking operations for how many years?
4.5 years in St. Louis, overall about 15.
About 15 years?
Yeah.
And I understand that it's customarily, you know, in different cities that they do the doubling.
Correct.
of fines. And I know at the parking commission meeting, that last one we had June the 8th, you had shown something from California, a city in California, where it looks like they did 21 days or so,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Is it consistent across the United States and many cities that they double fines within, before 30 days expire or whatever that state statute is?
Well, I'm not familiar, Alderman, with the state statutes, but when I go to the IPI, convention every year, I talk to other reps. And for example, in Florida, there's some other areas where the fines are low, but there's some cities in Florida that they double real quick, like 7-8 days, which we were surprised. But I haven't run across the 30 days versus the 14, which was before, and now it's 21.
And since we're in the state of Missouri, are you familiar with any other city within the state of Missouri where they double prior to 30 days?
No, sir.
Okay. Because Clayton is right next door. I know in Clayton, they probably raised it now, but I thought which was really cool is you got a ticket, if you paid it within 2 hours, it was like $2 or something.
Yeah.
And you made a $10 ticket.
Right.
I've never seen that anywhere else.
So I can find out from Kansas City because I'm familiar with the parking administrator there. I can call him and get back to you if you want to see what they do.
You sure that'll be okay? I don't want to ask for something that's unreasonable.
I think that's reasonable from
Okay.
my standpoint.
Yeah, I would be curious as to how Kansas City does it.
Okay. And I would like to say, so I did talk to Alderman Vaquero after the last committee meeting, and he was mindful. I said, we still have to operate, so we're gonna run out of tickets. And so the legislation that's on the back of the tickets now, we need to print those. I think it was
Okay.
100. He said, fine, I don't have a problem with that. I said, we're gonna go ahead and buy for the rest of the year, because I don't know what's gonna happen between now and the end of the year. And he was fine with that. He called me
Okay.
after the last meeting. So we did buy tickets that say what the current situation is, which is 21 days.
Okay.
Because we can't run out, we're
Right, right.
still out there. And he was
Absolutely.
fine with that. It's
Okay.
just gonna get decided
But
one way or another.
the situation is, he's looking at third read finally passage and make it law, which means that you
Yeah.
guys will have to abide by that unless you guys are
Right.
in the position that it doesn't matter what we do as a city, you're not gonna, adhere to our policies and laws. Because that's what I heard earlier, that the parking department is, well, not you, but was not going to, adhere to our current laws until some lawsuit is over with, but that's. I mean,
That wasn't my comment, but.
I know it wasn't,
Yeah.
but, and I don't wanna put you,
Still,
on a hot seat for anything and commit to something that you can't commit to. Because I know you are a parking commissioner as well, but you are also an employee. And we're having this conversation just in general.
Yes.
So I just want to, do the business of the city and do what's right.
Okay.
And as Alderman Bozzy said, basically, people can have attitudes and differences, but at the end of the day, people have to work together for a common goal at the end of the day. And there's more than one way to do something. That's why I'm supportive of making it happen at the parking commission level than making it happen at the legislative level.
Okay.
But we all have to be willing participants.
Right.
And when someone's been obstructing the process, then it makes it difficult.
So, but back to Alderman Coder, so we're gonna try to get you that information by the end of the week.
That'd be great, thank you.
It's fine. Does the whole committee want it? Should send it to you?
Sure, it actually would be very helpful, because when Jared said that, I was thinking, wow, how many
The whole
people
committee.
actually appeals? Matter of fact, you can just send it to me.
That's fine.
And then I'll get it to everybody else.
Okay,
Okay.
like that. We should have that by Friday,
Thank you.
by the close of Friday. It's Tuesday, take about 2-3 days to get that.
We want it 2 years back.
Yeah,
I think that's
yeah, they
fine.
want
2 years is
the
fine.
last week, what the difference would be on who appeals, how many people call.
And when is the parking conference you had mentioned?
Once a year.
And is it May or something?
Yeah, it's normally May, April, May. Last year was Nashville. I think the year before that was Vegas. Yeah.
Where you've come from, did parking commissioners any of them ever attend some of those meetings or those conferences?
Well, most cities is, it's the street department. Most cities is Department of Transportation. So this is a unique city where the treasurer is actually the representative you know, for the parking.
Right.
Most cities, it's the street department or
Staff
DOT.
goes, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the staff.
yeah.
Some
DOT,
staff
yeah.
goes. Okay. Okay, is she available Thursday?
She's unavailable on Thursday.
What's her next available date?
I'll have to get back with you. It'd be next week sometime.
Okay, next week. You think she'll have some available next week, or you'll get back to me next week?
No, I will get back to you. I said the availability would be next week.
Okay. Can you let me know by the end of the day?
I will circle back with you on that.
Okay. Alrighty, no, we'll hold it, we'll look at the treasurer's schedule for next week and have that. Right, have you heard from Alderman Green? Okay, so we'll hold the bill.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Jared, Alderman Boyd is requesting, instead of giving it to Alderman Coder, just to send the last week to him.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'll disseminate it down to the committee members. Okay, all right, I'll go ahead and consider the street committee adjourned.